โอกาสนี้ก็อยากจะขอเรียนเชิญท่านอธิการบดีมหาวิทยาลัยขอนแก่นค่ะรองศาสตราจารย์ดร.กิตติชัยไตรรัตนสิริชัยกรุณากล่าวต้อนรับผู้เข้าร่วมประชุมและวิทยากรพิเศษด้วยค่ะ
ศาสตราจารย์ดร.นายแพทย์กนกวงศ์ทำงานท่านสมาชิกสภาผู้แทนราษฎรนะครับท่านอุปนายกสภาท่านกรรมการสภาท่านผู้บริหารมหาวิทยาลัยแล้วก็ Professor ดร. Hundert เอ็ดวาร์ด Hundert นะครับที่ได้ให้เกียรติกับผู้บริหารมหาวิทยาลัยในวันนี้นะกิจกรรมการสารเสวนาของผู้บริหารมหาวิทยาลัยร่วมกับสภามหาวิทยาลัยเป็นกิจกรรมที่ผมค่อนข้างจะมั่นใจว่ามีไม่กี่มหาวิทยาลัยที่ได้ดำเนินกิจกรรมอย่างนี้มาอย่างต่อเนื่องนะครับโดยตลอดซึ่งถือว่าเป็นการทำความเข้าใจแล้วก็เป็นการปรึกษาหารือร่วมกันโดยมีเป้าหมายทิศทางอันเดียวกันก็คือจะขับเคลื่อนให้มหาวิทยาลัยก้าวเข้าไปสู่ความเป็นมหาวิทยาลัยชั้นนำในขณะเดียวกันเราก็ไม่ละเลยชุมชนและท้องถิ่นของพวกเราด้วยเพราะฉะนั้นบทบาทของมหาวิทยาลัยขอนแก่นในปัจจุบันเนี่ยตามเป้าหมายที่สภากำหนดไว้ก็เป็นเป้าหมายที่สูงนะครับก็คือเป้าหมายการเป็นมหาวิทยาลัยชั้นนำของโลกนะแล้วก็ในบทบาทของภารกิจของพวกเราปฏิเสธไม่ได้เลยที่เป็นความคาดหวังของชุมชนแล้วก็สังคมมาโดยตลอดเช่นเดียวกันเพราะฉะนั้นปัจจุบันมหาวิทยาลัยขอนแก่นจึงทำ2เรื่องนี้ควบคู่ขนานกันไปนะซึ่งการที่พวกเราได้มีโอกาสมาพูดคุยกันนอกสถานที่ก็ถือว่าเป็นการทำความเข้าใจแล้วก็ปรับยุทธศาสตร์ให้มันสอดคล้องกับภารกิจแล้วก็เป้าหมายของมหาวิทยาลัยซึ่งทั้งสภามหาวิทยาลัยเองก็ตามแล้วก็ผู้บริหารของมหาวิทยาลัยผู้บริหารของคณะวิชาเองก็ได้รับการถ่ายโอนภารกิจลงไปเป็นลำดับชั้นลงไปซึ่งหลายๆครั้งก็อาจจะมีประเด็นต่างๆที่คิดว่ามันอาจจะดำเนินการได้หรือไม่ได้วันการที่ได้มีโอกาสพูดคุยกันอย่างสม่ำเสมอและไม่เป็นทางการก็จะทำให้เกิดความเข้าใจกันได้ง่ายมากยิ่งขึ้นแล้วก็สามารถไปปรับเปลี่ยนยุทธศาสตร์และกลยุทธ์วิธีทำให้เราสามารถขับเคลื่อนเป้าหมายของมหาวิทยาลัยไปได้วันนี้เราก็คงจะได้มีโอกาสรับฟังบรรยายของท่าน Professor เอ็ดวาร์ด Hundert อีกครั้งหนึ่งนะครับ I'm very glad to have Professor Dr. Edward Hundert again today here in Mohin. Yesterday we had a very good opportunity to hear his very special lecture on teaching and learning in the 21st century and more than 300 audience very appreciate for your presentation yesterday and today we wish to learning from your experience especially for the administration on how to manage the university and also with your experience on the president of Case Western University in USA. I think we learn from your as Dr. Chin Chai said that we would not to compete with you but we would like to follow your step. Even 10%, 20% from your experience is also I would appreciate. We would like to welcome all of you here today in Mohin. Thank you very much.
Professor Edward Hundert is the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Harvard Medical School, where he is also senior lecturer in medical ethics. Over the past 25 years, he has served as President of Case Western Reserve University, Dean of the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry, and Associate Dean for Student Affairs at Harvard Medical School. Professor Hundert earned his bachelor's degree in mathematics from Yale University, attended Oxford University as a Marshall Scholar, and received the MD from Harvard Medical School. He is a world-renowned scholar who has received numerous awards, and for 6 consecutive years, he was voted the faculty member who did the most for the class by Harvard Medical School graduates. Professor Hundert is also a leader in developing innovative institutional affiliations and curricula, both in academic medical centers and across all levels of higher education. He has served on the boards of several associations, including the Association of American Universities, the American Association of Medical Colleges, the liaison committee on medical education, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He co-chaired the Institute of Medicine's National Summit on Health Professions Education and was key person in assembling the founding leadership and board of trustees of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, the first co-educational university in Saudi Arabia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Edward Hundert.
And I'm very, very honored to have a chance to talk with you today, and more than talking with you, to help facilitate a conversation about this topic of the opportunities and challenges of trying to build a world-class research university. Very, very challenging topic. But the opportunity, I think, that you have, given the resources that you have, given the aspirations that you have, and especially given the commitment of all of you to spend this time together, the council, the administrators at the university level, the deans, this is really a wonderful opportunity for all of you to think about these important things together. And as I say, it's really an honor for me to be here to try to help facilitate that conversation. And so in fact, I'm probably only going to take about 1/3 of the time allotted to give my remarks and try to reserve 2/3 for dialogue together and among you about some of the things I'm going to say. And as was mentioned in the introduction, the perspectives I'm going to share with you on this issue of trying to build a world-class research university come from a variety of perspectives. I serve on the faculty, so I'm a faculty member. That's probably my first perspective. I've been a dean of a medical school, so I have a sort of dean's perspective. I've been president of a research university, and probably most of my advice comes from that perspective. You have a very, very hard job. But I also have been on the board of a number of organizations, so serve on the equivalent of a council. I have done a lot of work with universities around the US, but also in Europe and in the Middle East, trying to help universities think about these issues. And I realize that every place is different. Every place has different culture, every place has different constraints that they're facing. I always like to say, if you've seen one world-class research university, you've seen one world-class research university. There is no, you can't generalize about many things, but there are some lessons that can be learned from mistakes that I've made along the way, but mistakes that other people have made, and also from strategies that universities have employed to try to elevate their stature and their level of excellence as a university. And I think that the best way to get into this is I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the university and the history of research universities and how we ended up with the structures we have, because I think that's the context for a lot of the challenges that we need to overcome. I want to talk particularly about the pursuit of excellence and how different universities try to pursue excellence. And I want to finish the third topic talking about the governance of the university, because I think that often is the key ingredient. There are many ingredients to making a world-class university. And I'll say up front that the quality of a university is defined by the quality of the faculty. So, you know, the council members and the deans and the presidents and vice presidents are all here developing a strategy to try to say, if we want to become a better and better and more highly ranked and more attractive and productive university, how can we be a magnet to attract the best faculty that we can attract? That's really the overarching strategy that any university has to focus on if they want to elevate their quality. So a little on the history. Universities in their present form are sometimes thought of as starting in the 13th century. In Italy, University of Padua, 1222, and so forth. But the modern version of what we now call a research university really came out of Germany. Most of the European and American universities that are hundreds of years old modeled themselves on the original universities in Heidelberg and in other parts of Germany. And these universities originally started, and even the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, these very ancient universities, mostly started with a focus on undergraduate education, and mostly for religious studies, for clerical training of ministers and things like that. And over the years, they evolved to think about undergraduate education in a variety of other fields, in the arts, the humanities, the sciences, the social sciences. And they started to develop organizational structures, departments, schools, around the needs of teaching young people, teaching undergraduates. And the way that that structure evolved, interestingly, and I don't want to get too much on theory, but it actually came from a way of looking at the world that was first articulated by the philosopher Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant had an idea that the world was organized so that there is a priori theoretical knowledge, there's empirical knowledge, there are ways of organizing the world. And if you look at the way Harvard University is organized today, the fact that there's a separate school of arts and sciences comes from that Kantian Germanic view. I mean, what the Department of French Literature has to do with the Department of Physics, I'm not sure, but they're in one school because of this theory of how the mental realm and the social realm are organized. And I'll say that, I thoroughly believe that the research university is the single greatest achievement of the human mind. The research university is the single greatest achievement of the human mind. In fact, much of the knowledge and achievements of humanity have emanated from research universities. Much of what we know about the world comes from research universities. And interestingly, the great success of the research university in thinking about how the natural world is organized and the social world is organized and the mental world is organized, the conclusion of all that research is that the natural world, social world, and mental world do not respect any of the boundaries that Kant initially postulated. That is to say, the way the university is organized does not actually correspond at all to the kind of research you would want to do in the modern world. And so every university in the world is currently focusing on having interdisciplinary collaborations, centers that span multiple departments, this transdisciplinary research institutes. And all of those structures, the research institutes and the interdisciplinary centers of excellence and all of these things are grafted on a structure that was organized for the teaching of undergraduates in the various disciplines. Now, we still have a very important mission to teach undergraduates in these disciplines. At KKU, there are 30,000 undergraduates who are getting a degree in a field, and so you can't throw that away. That's very important to have these structures in order to meet the undergraduate mission. But to the extent that your focus right now, and certainly the vision that was described just now, is about being a research university, and if your focus were solely on becoming the best research enterprise, you would not organize it along those structures. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But I just want to say the history of universities evolved from undergraduate institutions, and then about 150 years ago, research universities started grafting on graduate programs and professional programs. these same institutes of higher learning became the place to train doctors and lawyers who used to be trained in other ways, in apprenticeship sorts of programs. And during the 19th century, the universities started to become the centers for graduate education and professional education. Started adding master's degrees, PhD degrees, MD degrees, JD degrees in this same enterprise. And because they did not fit in any of these natural things, they started to evolve as separate schools within the structure of the university. So now you have the departments that really were created in order to support undergraduate education, historically. The professional and graduate schools that evolved for professional training. And then, in the late 19th century, the research mission of a number of these universities started to take off. And so they grafted on top of that the idea that the universities should support the scholarship that is actually changing the very nature of the field that people are studying. And you started adding PhD programs, research laboratories, all of the infrastructure to support that. But again, historically, it was undergraduate, then graduate and professional, then research grafted on top. Think about the implications for how KKU is organized, for example. And then the last mission, which is really what a lot of universities talk about over the last several decades, is a social economic development mission for their region or their country that says, if we're doing this research, how are we linking that to industry in order to have spin out companies and have a positive effect on the economy and have some of that economic development come back to support the university. And that's the most recent phenomenon. And again, if you were going to organize a research institute whose main role was this economic development, technology transfer role, you wouldn't necessarily organize it the way historically universities are organized. But that's how we're all organized. So we're all in this together in that challenge. Okay, does that make sense? That's the sort of historical perspective, the context for one of the challenges, which is how, with these multiple missions, we have the mission of teaching undergraduates and developing their minds and giving them employable skills. We have the graduate and professional mission of training people for various specialties and professions. We have a research mission to advance knowledge on behalf of our society. And we have this economic development mission to make sure that, especially as a publicly funded university, we are doing research on areas that are important to Thailand and particularly to northeastern Thailand. So, I just want to tell one story which I think is illuminating, and was mentioned in this very generous introduction from Nat. We actually, I was asked by the founders of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia to be part of a small team of former university presidents to help them think about how to build a world-class research university from scratch. So this was a wonderful intellectual thought. If you started with a blank piece of paper, which we had, once in a lifetime chance to do, it was Saudi Arabia, so unlimited resources, right? In Saudi Arabia, if they need more money, they just pull it out of the ground, right? So that wasn't the limiting resource. And they said, how should we organize our university so that this research university can start to develop new areas of knowledge and research that can diversify our economy so that someday when the oil runs out, we have other things happening. Right now we're a one industry economy, and the king, in his wisdom, King Abdullah, realized that the only way, thinking 50 years forward, to solve that problem is to have a research university. It's a very wise, inspired choice that he made, and he said, this is going to be my legacy. He put his name on it, with King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and it better be world class. So a group of us who were former presidents of universities Degrees and the head of the National Academy of Science were convened to try to put together a plan. And the first decision we made, which was not necessarily intuitive because this was supposed to be a university, is we decided that if the focus really were on the research and this economic development tech transfer, we shouldn't have any undergraduates. And so KAUST, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, KAUST, they call it KAUST. If you go on their website, you can see it's a graduate-only university. They have master's degrees and PhDs. So this is, in the US context, like Rockefeller University. So Rockefeller University in the US has only graduate degrees, and the focus is on biomedicine. The idea of KAUST was to have graduate degrees and focus on engineering, science, and technology. There's no medicine, it's all about developing solar energy, water desalination research, developing edible plants that can grow in the desert. You know, all of the big issues that the Gulf region face and the world face. So, what would be the structure that you would put into place if you weren't having undergraduates? We decided that the organizational structure of this university would be organized around the problems that the kingdom wanted to solve. So instead of having a school of engineering and a school of basic science or arts and sciences and a school of, we said the organizational structure would be the Institute for Solar Energy, the Institute for Water Desalination Research, the Institute for Drought-Tolerant Edible Plant Genomics. And the reason we did that really came from our interviewing with some of the world's leading scientists. I had this wonderful opportunity to travel around the world and interview the leading scientists in water desalination research and solar energy research and so forth. So you go to UC San Diego in beautiful La Jolla, California, and you interview the world's expert on water desalination research. And you look him in the eye and you say, I have unlimited resources. Tell me what it would take to recruit you from beautiful La Jolla to Saudi Arabia. Now, interestingly, I think especially with the council and the administrators here, what motivates these world-class faculty is not primarily their own personal money. Now, of course, they want to be paid a lot more if they have to live in Saudi Arabia than living in beautiful La Jolla. That goes without saying. But the people we were interviewing, the world-class faculty who define a world-class university, these are people with big ideas. And this person would say, you know what? I have a theory about how I could solve the world's water problem. I actually believe that I have a way you could take seawater and efficiently and cost-effectively, using solar energy, extract the salt from it so that you could have drinking water. And the trouble is, I can't prove my theory for 3 reasons. The first reason is I don't have the resources. This is not a theoretical problem, this is a practical problem. The laboratory I need is a small industrial-sized pilot plant sitting on a body of salt water where we can tweak and experiment. And all the NSF and NIH grants in the world are not going to build me an industrial-sized pilot plant here on the Pacific Ocean in La Jolla. So resources are an important factor. And they say, and of course, there's the science. Maybe the theory that I have isn't compatible with nature. That's the big problem, and that's the only way to know that is to try. But the biggest problem, the single biggest problem that prevents me from solving the world's water needs is that these problems are interdisciplinary problems. to do this research, I need electrical engineers. I need microbiologists because the water has all this algae and bacteria in it. And I need biological scientists. I need statisticians who can analyze massive amounts of data. And I'm at UC San Diego, which evolved just like your university and every other university. And as someone in the School of Engineering, every time I want to hire a microbiologist or a statistician, I have to spend a year and a half negotiating a treaty with the other dean because, you know, what percent of the salary is from this one and what percent, you know, and by the time we've negotiated the treaty, the person I'm trying to get has taken a job at another university. So that's actually the rate limiting factor for me being able, and we heard the same thing from the people working on solar energy. We heard the same thing from people working on the drought-tolerant edible plant genomics. And so that was what gave us the idea. What if the organizational structure, if the focus were the research rather than the education, was a center for water desalination research, and you were in charge of it? And you would recruit into your center a statistician, an electrical engineer, a microbiologist, and the poor deans who are in charge of the master's and the PhD program will have to negotiate with you to make sure that the basic courses are covered. That somebody is giving a course on basic fluid mechanics or, you know, the courses that we need, and they will be scrambling around to piece together the curricular offering while your focus is the research, rather than the way our universities are organized, which is the organizational structure supports the curricular development. We want to have a new course in something, we know exactly how to do it within our engineering school. But the poor guy who's trying to solve the water problem has to run around negotiate. So we did it the other way around. All right? So that was a very interesting insight because the leading researcher in water desalination at UCSD and the leading researcher in edible plant genomics, stress-tolerant edible plant genomics at University of Arizona, and the leading solar energy researcher at Cambridge University all moved to Saudi Arabia. And it was mostly because of this opportunity to do their work and try to solve their problem. Okay? So, let me set that aside for a minute. You can think about the implications for what that means for the rest of us. Because at Harvard, at Case Western Reserve, we don't have caste structure. We have the usual structure. And so, like I say, all of these creative research enterprises and efforts at economic development and partnering with industry, you know, one of the greatest opportunities we have today and tomorrow meeting together is the deans and the vice presidents and the senior administrator have this wonderful group called the University Council. And the University Council has different perspectives. There are business people, there are people in government, there are people in banking, there are people in, you know, all different industries. And, you know, I can tell you, having really, as president of Case Western Reserve, tried to emphasize our technology transfer mission, most people in industry, what sometimes they call the real world, I'm not sure what the academic world is, but they'll say people in the real world, you know, they're very suspicious of working with universities because they know that if they try to fund a joint research program together, it's going to take forever because someone's going to have to negotiate all these treaties. And they're like, you know, we don't do that in my world. And so universities have lost a lot of opportunity to partner with industry because of our organizational structure. And if you can think about the best way to balance all of these missions, because you have to do both and, right? You can't do one or the other. You can become a magnet for these kinds of collaborations and resources from industry and from other enterprises that can help elevate the university. So I want us to talk about how do we do that. That's, you know, it's easy to say these things. Well, actually, it's not that easy, but I just said it. And it's hard to do. Hard to do. And it's hard to do partly because of the incentive structures within universities, which aren't going to change anytime soon. And so we have to think about how to motivate people to want to do these kinds of things, right? Because the governance of a university is such that it's not like a company. You can't just order someone to do something and think they're going to do it. You actually have to create a structure that makes great faculty want to come and do these things. There's never been a university that rose up because of a command and control approach to the strategy, right? But we should talk together about what the strategy is to make that all happen. The other thing I want to just say a couple of words about is I've talked about this issue of thinking across the schools and the departments and the challenge that that faces when you're trying to solve real-world problems. I also mentioned yesterday in my talk about teaching and learning that I think where research university strategies are the most powerful is when you're also thinking across the missions of the university. So we have an education mission for teaching, we have a research mission to advance knowledge, we have a service mission to society. So if you start with those three missions, and you say, okay, what kind of program combines the missions so that it actually, as you're doing the research, is helping the education mission rather than competing with the education mission, right? Because the only way to lubricate the tension that I was just talking about is to try to find ways that each of these missions is synergistic rather than antagonistic. Most people view them as antagonistic. They say, well, if you make me teach, I don't have as much time for my research. Or if you make me do this community project, I don't have as much time for my teaching. And the question is, how could you think across the missions to create energizing focuses of activity that will support rather than hinder the synergy between the missions? And the example I gave yesterday, since the council members were here, maybe I'll give that one example, but I'll give 2 or 3 examples. And I'll even throw out a couple of completely make-believe examples for KKU. And that they're probably completely wrong because I don't know enough about KKU. I've been trying to learn. So I'll just give them as examples, not to discuss those examples, but to give you the idea of what I'm talking about. So the example that I gave yesterday was actually an example from our dental school, since Chip has been posting me. Case Western Reserve has a really wonderful dental school. And they had this issue that most professional education schools have, that the first years of the degree are all about delayed gratification for the students. That's how it is in my field of medicine. You know, the students have worked so hard to get to medical school, they've done so well on their tests, and then they spend 2 years sitting in a classroom saying, well, I don't know, maybe I'll need to know this, or I might kill someone someday, you know, but they don't understand the real usefulness of what they're learning. But there's this idea that until you know enough of this knowledge, we can't let you loose on the real world. And the same is true in engineering. You know, until you know enough, we can't have you building a bridge. You know, you'll kill somebody. And until you know enough about the science of dentistry, you can't start getting into people's mouths and teeth. But it actually makes the education kind of dull for the students in the early years. And so the dean of our dental school noticed that the oral health of the people in Cleveland, in inner city Cleveland, very, very poor city, was once a rich city, and it is now a very poor city. And as a result, there are many, many health problems. And one of them is the teeth of the children are very, very bad. And it's completely preventable. Unlike some things in medicine, if you apply sealants to children's teeth at age-appropriate stages of their life, you can prevent the vast, vast majority of cavities and problems with teeth. It's just a question of applying these sealants, the right sealant at the right ages with multiple coatings at certain ages that you apply them. And he said, you know, you don't need to have a dental degree to know how to do that. right? Most public health initiatives here in Thailand, dental health nurses apply sealants. Certainly a first-year dental student should be able to learn how to apply sealants. And so they started to teach the first-year students this real practical skill, and they formed a partnership with the elementary schools, the primary schools in the city of Cleveland. And they made a commitment that we will take responsibility for the oral health of the city of Cleveland, and we will go into the schools, and 1 or 2 days a year at each of the grades that the children are these ages that you apply them, we take over one of the big rooms, the auditorium, we set up lots of chairs, and we bring the kids in and we have our dental students apply the sealants to their teeth. Well, it was very interesting what happened, because the researchers in the dental school who were interested in epidemiology pointed out that there's never actually been a population-based study proving the cost efficiency of dental sealants for a whole population. They say, you know, we could actually do a research on treating a whole population and following them over the next 20 years to show how much money it saved in all the treatment these people would have needed, so that we could convince the government that going forward they should pay for the sealants because it will save so much money. So there was this very important research element that got grafted on. The faculty in the dental school who were teaching the students thought, you know, this is taking them away from, we have to cover the material. And these students are leaving our school and going into elementary schools. Why are they wasting their time? You know, there was a lot of resistance to spending this much time in the curriculum by a lot of the basic science faculty in the dental school. But they went ahead and did it. And what was really interesting was that the second year, the basic science faculty became the champions of this dental sealant program, because the students were coming into their class really hungry to learn about the molecular structure of the polymers of these sealants. Why does this one work better than this one? Suddenly it was relevant. They had a clinical context for what they were learning, and the people who were teaching clinical skills were even more impressed, because most of these students, as I said yesterday, have this fantasy that when they're a dentist someday, their patients will sit still. And they could, you know, these children are moving around, and they have to learn how to deal with that. And so the students were very more curious to learn the clinical skills as well from the very first year. So when I was at the University of Rochester, we did the same thing with the medical students. We found some public health issues, high blood pressure, right? You can teach a first-year med student how to take blood pressure. You don't have to have your MD degree. And we said, we are going to make Rochester a healthier city. We're going to partner with the city to get the first and second-year med students into the city doing these public health initiatives in a way that actually made them more interested in their education and led to all kinds of research opportunities that attracted grants from the NIH and was a synergy between and among all of the missions. So this is just within one school now. I'm not talking about inter-school collaborations on research. I'm talking about something that one school on their own can do to think across the education, research, and service missions of the university. And so, you know, after I wrap up in a few minutes with a couple of other comments on governance, I want to just challenge you all to think, and I hope that this afternoon when you're talking together, you could think about where are the areas that KKU can work across schools and departments and across missions. So there's kind of a 2x2 axis here. Because I actually believe that within the disciplines and within the missions, almost all of the niches are filled. If you want to compete and move up the QS rankings and all this sort of stuff, trying to do that by saying, within our school, in our department, we want to do even a little better on this, that's what everyone is doing, right? I mean, you should do that too, but it is not a strategy that's going to differentiate you from the thousands of other universities. And in China, every month a new university is doing the same thing. It's not going to help differentiate you and make you elevate your research profile. However, if you think together this afternoon, I guess one of my challenges for this afternoon would be to think, okay, what are the unique and changing elements that that are unique to KKU that other universities might not enjoy? Okay, so for example, and they could be anything. So for example, they could be your physical location, right? The fact that you are located where you are and you have a center for the study of Mekong regional studies, right? Other places don't have that. So keep that in mind. How could we leverage that uniqueness? You have this new interesting access of the train coming this way and the road coming this way. You are in a city that is growing, right? Konkan is exploding right now, right? When I was at Case Western Reserve, the city was shrinking. It was much harder for us to try to hitch our star to something new that was going forward in a city that is in what they call the decaying Rust Belt of America. Every time they do a new census, we lose another congressman in Ohio because our population is going down, right? Konkan, the population is exploding. The biggest issue is who here hasn't bought some real estate so that it can appreciate, right? So that is something that's unique and different from many other places. How might that connect to these other areas? There is the climate change of where you are. I've been learning a lot. It's been so interesting to me to hear about with the change in climate, what it has meant for the soil, your agriculture school, what it's meant for the fact that now rubber trees are growing here as well as in the south. And again, that's a change and it's something new. So when you think, what could we do that would have this element, and I think it's good to have some name for this. And I guess the name I would put to it is compelling excellence. Compelling excellence. The idea is, what could we do, given our unique strengths? We have this, particularly strong engineering program and medical program, and we have this history of these different programs. Given our physical location, which is unique, given the things that are changing, our population density, our climate, the agricultural implications of those things, given all of those changes, how could we try to create some interdisciplinary, multi-mission program that would have such compelling excellence that it would be a magnet for the best faculty in the world who wanted to work in that intersection? And not only that, but compelling excellence is also a magnet for resources. This is when industry wants to partner with you, and other universities, leading universities, want to partner with you in a way that actually helps you and your mission. So you could have, and again, here's where I'm going to make some things up, because I don't know enough about all these fields. I'm not a rubber tree expert or a Mekong population studies expert. But I could imagine somebody saying that with this new growth of this rubber tree industry in the Northeast, that somebody is going to be interested in wondering whether the genetics of this rubber that comes out on the molecular basis of it is different from other places. And in fact, if the people in the engineering school were interested in its properties, and the people in the medical school were interested in the protein structures, and there were ways in which somebody would say, okay, what if the new aerospace industries that are thinking about new ways of building planes with carbon composite have to think about new ways of having the rubber for their tires when they land? We might be a place that could put together this change in climate, our strength in medical research, and our engineering, material science, and create a center that would attract those companies to partner with us and would attract other universities to partner with. You can imagine in my field in medicine, right now the sort of promise of medicine is what we call genomic medicine or personalized medicine. Tailoring the treatment to the specific genomic disease that that person has. That's sort of the promise right now. The trouble is that the genetic heterogeneity of people is so complex. You have this unique location with all of these different cultures around you, and there aren't, we can't do this as well in Cleveland, Ohio. Much more homogeneous, right? So if you're at Harvard and you tried to do this, you wouldn't be able to tell the following story. And the story would be, we're interested in disease outcomes among these different cultures, right? I mean, from what I've read, I've tried to read through all of your materials, the focus of the regional studies of this diversity center for the Mekong region is really on the cultural differences and understanding. It's not as based on the genetics, right? You have this big medical research enterprise. Right now in clinical trials in medicine, here's what's happening. So it's very exciting actually. In the past, like when I was studying medicine, if you had a new treatment for breast cancer or any kind of cancer, and you thought, okay, this new drug, this is going to be the new wonder drug, and you would give women with breast cancer this drug, and some percentage of them got better, and some percentage of them didn't get better. And if 80% got better, you hit the home run. You're going to really make a lot of money and become famous. If only 20% of them got better and 80% didn't, you're not going to do so well. What happened starting about 20 years ago is people went back to some of those original studies and looked at the 20% who got better and said, wait a second, do you know that all 20% who got better came from Malaysia? Actually, there's some genetic type of cancer in Malaysia for which this drug is 100% effective. And by reanalyzing the data, starting to think about this, people start sequencing the genes and trying to get underneath what happened. Actually, the dean of the medical school at National University of Singapore was a fellow at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York who made some of these discoveries. And Singapore similarly, he was thinking in this way. So you could say to yourself, okay, how can our Mekong diversity studies link to medical research in new ways, in a way that, again, if you really had a discovery like that, I'm just making this up, I'm not an expert in these fields, you can bet that pharmaceutical companies would want to come to Khon Kaen to set up a partnership to do these studies with you. And you can bet that the best researchers interested in personalized genomic medicine would want to come to Khon Kaen because you have access to patients, a patient base that other places don't have. And most importantly, and this is where all these MOUs that everybody signs all the time, for every MOU you sign, how many of them become a real research collaboration? Very few, right? And so, in fact, I used to think when I was president of the university, all the MOUs were slowing us down because I was spending so much time posing for photos with presidents of other universities having MOUs, I could have been doing my job instead. So, one of the things you can do is say, okay, if we wanted to do this, maybe we lack one ingredient. Maybe we don't have high throughput gene sequencers that someone would need. But maybe there's a university in the US or in Europe or somewhere else that has lots of high throughput genetic sequencers but doesn't have access to your population. That's an MOU that can lead to a really productive research collaboration. Because they can't answer their questions without you, and you can't do the work without them. And that's really the ingredient of a successful university collaboration. It's completely mutual. Both places are getting benefit. So, there was one last piece of the KAUST story, the King Abdullah University story, that I wanted to tell because I think it's relevant to the way you might think about these things. And that is, the king originally thought that maybe his university should be a collaboration with one of the world's great universities. So this would be, sort of like you have Johns Hopkins in Singapore, you have NYU Abu Dhabi, or you have Cornell in Qatar, you know, something like this. And, you know, maybe there should be MIT on the Red Sea, you know, or something like that. And we advised him against it. Our group of advisors said, you know what, if you become MIT on the Red Sea, first of all, you don't know whether the next president of MIT is going to care about this, and whether the board of the council of MIT is going to care about this 20 years from now. And in fact, more and more of those kinds of collaborations are going very poorly as the enthusiastic leaders who signed the MOUs and started it move on, and the next person says, well, that's that person's legacy, what's my legacy going to be? And it's actually not a winning strategy, and besides which, MIT is doing fine right now. All you can give them is the money. Like, you have all this money, but you know, that actually that doesn't last as a real time. If you had something that MIT needed to advance their cause besides money, this could be a real partnership. So what we did is we went around the world and we tried to find universities who had specific areas of research that the Saudi enterprise, their climate, the desert, and so forth, was something that would enable the faculty at the other university to do that they otherwise couldn't do, so that it was a real win for the faculty. And we said, we're not going to have one partnership. KAUST is going to be KAUST. It's not going to be MIT KAUST. It's not going to be Caltech KAUST or Harvard KAUST. But UC Berkeley is the partner for their mechanical engineering program. And Cambridge University is the partner for their bioengineering program. And Texas A&M is the partner for their, you know, so, and each of those was based not on our talking with deans, but talking with faculty who had a question that they could only answer if they were on the Red Sea. The leading marine biology program in the world, well, there are two, Scripps on the West Coast and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute on Cape Cod. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute is where they discovered the Titanic from. They do all this marine biology. The Red Sea is the most understudied body of water on the planet. Because of the politics of that area, you can't bring research vessels in because each of the countries thinks it's a spy from the other country. And so we worked with all of the governments involved, and we had, you know, the Egyptian, it's sort of interesting, with bodies of water, I think it's 50 miles out is considered part of yours, or I forget how many miles, but that's the width of the Red Sea. So each side thinks the whole Red Sea belongs to them, and because it's not very wide. And so we actually worked with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute to form a partnership because there are questions about marine life that can only be answered by sending scientists to the Red Sea, and they were hungry to do it, right? So this wasn't a president or a dean saying to their faculty, I just signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia, you have to go over to Saudi Arabia, and they're like, oh my gosh, you know. This was the faculty lobbying the dean. We want to do this. You get out of our way. And if you can think of areas that will make the partner university's faculty try to convince their deans and presidents to get out of their way and let them do it, that's the real sign of success, right? Because, like I say, it's all about creating incentives for the faculty to do these things. So, you know, right now I've been working a lot with the country of Kuwait on their healthcare system, doing a big healthcare reform project. And again, the Minister of Health there said, we want to build an academic medical center. You know, we're going to call it Kuwait Medical City. You know, so maybe this should be Johns Hopkins, you know, in Kuwait, or it should be University of Pennsylvania in Kuwait. And we said, no. You know, what you should do is, on a department by department basis, find a collaboration where the person really wants to collaborate, right? Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi is just not taking off. And it's because somebody signed an MOU and they put their name on the door, and now they have to order heart surgeons to go over there. Heart surgeons don't take orders very well. I know surprise to the dean of our medical school, but it's hard to tell them what to do. What we did in Kuwait Medical City is we said, you know what? Kuwait turns out to have the highest incidence of spina bifida in the world. There are some researchers in the pediatric surgery program at Johns Hopkins who believe they have a way to close the spinal cord of these babies while they're still in the womb, so that before they're born, they wouldn't have all of the problems of the spinal bifida. The trouble is, they don't have a big enough N, as researchers like to say, in order to prove this. In Kuwait, they have the highest incidence of spina bifida, but they don't have this technology. So the faculty at Johns Hopkins were saying to the dean of their med school, we want you to give us resources to be able to partner so that we will be the pediatric surgery department for this city. The diabetes researchers in Boston, the incidence of diabetes in Kuwait is 25% of people have diabetes. 40% of children have type 2 diabetes. It's unbelievable. So the research that the diabetes people want to do. So again, this is the sort of idea that I'm talking about, is to try to think together about what would be these areas based on the unique assets. And you have so many assets at KKU. It's easy. Academic cultures, let's face it, are cultures of whining, right? Complaining. This is what we do. I do. When I'm at Harvard, I'm a faculty member, I complain, right? So it's my job, You have, we're at a retreat, we're this beautiful resort. We have a day and a half for you all to think, what are our assets? What are our strengths? How do we take those strengths of our unique location, our unique research base that we already have? You have an incredible research base. The changes that are happening right now with the growth of our city, the climate, any other changes that you can think of. How do we create some new ideas that would get our faculty excited, that would actually say, if we put some resources into this, it will become an example of compelling excellence, an example of what will be a magnet for resources, so that the faculty will be lobbying us to want to play. Not that we're trying to force them to say, this is our new strategic plan, get with the program, right? And I guess that's the last thing I wanted to say before I open it up to spend the rest of the time in dialogue, and that is, the council members, many of them have academic backgrounds, but the idea of a council is usually to bring people with different backgrounds together so that they can have a different perspective. And some of the council members come from industry, where if you want to elevate your company, what you do is you develop a strategic plan. And you make sure it's a really good plan. You get lots of different perspectives and experts, and you hire consultants and the whole business. You put together the plan. And let's say you're Toyota company. You make cars. And you have this idea, well, all these Americans used to buy great big minivans, but now things are changing and they want to buy little hybrids. So we have to change our strategy. And we have to stop manufacturing as many Siennas and start making more, hybrid. You say, okay, well, we're a matrix organization, right? We're a great big company, and we have the people who make the Corollas and the people who make the Siennas and the people who make the hybrids, and we have the people who buy steel for the cars and the people who buy the glass for the windows. And we're going to change our strategy. We're going to stop making these kind of cars. We're going to start making those, and we know who's accountable for each thing. Because if we need to have a different kind of engine part for these kinds of cars, there's somebody in that matrix whose job is on the line. Change what you're doing. We have a new strategic plan, or work somewhere else. Pretty clear. That's the strategic planning approach, right? Needless to say, within the university council, and fair enough, the businessmen on the council want to know what your strategic plan is to elevate the university. You want to become a world-class research university? Show me your strategic plan, and then show me how you're going to get everyone marching to follow in uniform step to our strategic plan. Trouble is, the university Well, first of all, we're not even sure what we're making. You know, I mean, at least Toyota knows they're making cars. Like, what are we making? You know, we're making graduates, we're making knowledge, I don't know. You know, even within the faculty of medicine, we can't agree what we're making. So making a strategic plan is a little bit more challenging. In fact, you know, you usually have to have one to show the government, but you know, that's not actually where the action is. So what is the way to lead change? This is I view everyone in this room as the leadership group of KKU, right? So, you know, think together as the deans, as the vice presidents, the council members, the alumni representatives, everybody. You are the leadership of this university. And you have to say, how can we, if we come up with a good plan, let's say we generate some ideas this afternoon and tomorrow for compelling excellence, it's going to think across the whole university, it's going to capitalize on our assets, it's going to be a magnet for the world's best faculty in those areas and research. We're going to stop focusing so much directly on manipulating the ingredients of the rankings, and we're going to focus on this, because if we do this, the rankings will take care of themselves. And this is actually a bit of advice I would give you. So many universities right now are, you know, trying to move up the rankings, and that's fair enough. That's something you have to do, because I think of them as a necessary evil. I mean, you have to remember that this is a business, the people who do these rankings, right? And we're all pawns in their game. But we can't get out of it. I get the economics faculty in your business school call this a prisoner's dilemma. You know? Unless every university refuses to give them the information, they'll keep doing this, and they'll make money from doing it, and so on. So we're stuck with it, okay? However, if you say, how are we going to improve our reputation? And how are we going to improve our publications per faculty and our citations per publication and all of these things? You can focus on each of those, or you can do what I'm talking about. Create these areas of loose connection. But I can guarantee you, from having worked with many research universities, one of the necessary conditions for this to work is to have a council that is unified in its support of the vision of the university. And that is actually empowering the president to be able to lead the university in the way we're talking about. The leadership of the council, it falls to the leadership of the council to really lead the council in that way, so that the president and the dean can lead the university and the school. And that's where I think when you were talking about working from the heart as well as the head and having the passion for this mission, it's very, very challenging. Very, very challenging, because it's different from anything else in the world. Like I say, a research university is different from any, you've seen one research university, you've seen one research university, not you've seen them all. And so, thinking about how the council can use its wisdom and can use its reach, its connections, to try to help make all of these things happen is one of the challenges. And having an opportunity for the dean and the central administration and the council to think together this afternoon about all of these issues, about good governance to achieve a higher level of research university status, about the strategy for these centers of compelling excellence that will hitch your star to some of the things that are changing and the assets that you already have, and that try to balance the fact that you still have to teach undergraduates. You can't become King Abdullah University and say, we're just going to do research or whatever, right? You have an important social mission to teach all of these undergraduates. And you don't want that to go away either. But I'll tell you, the undergraduates would rather come to a university where these exciting things are happening. I mean, it's sort of interesting that in the US, there historically was this idea, if your children are applying to college, you say, well, do I want them to go to a liberal arts college, get a liberal education, or do I want them to go to a research university? You know what? The best liberal arts education is at a research university. because people are thinking not about just the transmission of information, they're thinking about the creation of knowledge. And that's actually what you want young people who are getting a degree in any field. If they're studying French, if they're studying history, you want them to be thinking in that way, to be truly educated. And so you can offer a better undergraduate liberal kind of education if you are focused as a world-class research university. So let me stop there. And I'm not sure if this room is so big that we need microphones passed around or not. And actually, yeah, I think, you know, as a doctor, I took this oath to be humanitarian. So I think we need a short biological break.